moving on to transfer portal. And look, with the announcement, Florida, Tulane in the Gasparilla Bowl, that game being next Friday. Well, for Florida, it's going to make a lot of sense for Florida to do a lot of hosting this week for the transfer portal. So starting this week, this weekend, early next week, I think you'll be seeing heavy number of visits there for the Gators. Calls won't be on campus most of next week due to being in Tampa for the bowl game. So wide receiver, that's the position being talked about the most right here for the transfer portal. I remember going back a year ago and last year being told that we had so many young, good wide receivers on the roster that we didn't need to hit the transfer portal. And then we went and got Chimere DK and Elijah Badger, and I think we saw the results of that one. Florida needed to hit the transfer portal last year for wide receivers. So glad they did, and got some really, really good production out of the two transfers to come in and lead the Gators at that position. Difference makers at the position are DK and Badger. So with those guys gone, though, Andy Jean entering the portal, Florida will look for 2-3 guys to bring in here, and more than likely, and kind of just specifying the big body at the spot here. So we'll go through a few names here at the wide receiver spot. Nick Anderson, transfer Oklahoma, missed time this season due to injury, but was very productive in year one in Norman. In 2023, he caught 31 passes, 798 yards, 10 touchdowns. 24/7 Sports ranks the 6'4", 216-pound Anderson as the transfer portal's number 5 overall prospect right now and the number 2 wide receiver as of Monday afternoon. So big target there at the wide receiver spot. Here on Monday, of course, is when the transfer portal opened. We started getting a whole bunch of names. Reggie Virgil, he's received an offer from Florida. 6'4" wide receiver, transfer from Miami of Ohio, coming off a breakout campaign in which he recorded 816 yards, 9 touchdowns on 41 catches. He's from the Mount Dora area, which, of course, is around Orlando, Gainesville. So Gators could give him an opportunity to return close to home. FSU has also offered. Chase Sowell, 6'4", sophomore. Hey, you notice the trend here. 6'4", sophomore, 34 catches, 678 yards last season at East Carolina. He's been productive in his 2 years at ECU. 79 passes caught for 1,300 yards, 4 touchdowns. Both his parents played sports at the University of Florida. Eric Rivers, junior in 2024. Rivers took a medical redshirt in 2022 before transferring from Memphis to FIU. He had a decent debut in 2023, hauling in 32 passes for 343 yards, 2 touchdowns, before exploding this past season, especially down the stretch. Rivers caught 62 passes for 12 touchdowns and over 1,100 yards. That included at least 1 touchdown in 7 of 8 Conference USA games. As I mentioned, played great down the stretch. He had 30 catches for 591 yards and 7 touchdowns in the final 4 games for the Panthers. Doesn't have great size now. This one's a little bit different. 5'11", 175, but operated outside, one of the country's best deep threats. He racked up 637 yards on targets more than 20 yards down the field. 3rd best in the country. Familiar name from last year, C.J. Daniels from LSU. I know there were reports of interest there. Not so sure about the interest on Florida side. Was a big fan of his last transfer cycle, a year ago, but he went to LSU instead. Limited season, dealing with injury. So we'll see if any more enter, but Nick Marsh at Michigan State is one that hasn't entered yet that we know of. Heard there might be interest in him if he does. Wide receiver Eric Singleton at Georgia Tech. Talented receiver. Apparently has interest in Florida. Caught 56 passes for 754 yards this season. Seems like Georgia has an early lead there. Maybe the same for Dane Key from Kentucky. And then Caleb Odom at Bama, former on-3 5-star tight end. He played receiver for the Crimson Tide this past season. 7 catches, 65 yards. And then Nitro Tuggle at Georgia. He enters the portal as well. Appeared in 7 games for Georgia this season. 3 passes, 34 yards, 2 catches in the Tennessee game. So for 25 yards, he's 6'2", 195 pounds. So, Will, as I said, getting into the list here, a lot of options early on in the transfer portal for the Gators. Clearly, and as we know this roster, Florida going for some size and some deep downfield threats.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about Lagway and you think about where his strengths lie, it's obviously the deep shots. And then if you think about where you would want to see improvement, I would say you'd want to see improvement in the red zone. So anybody that you can get that you can make those back shoulder throws in the red zone and use a guy who's 6'4", 6'5", and, Lagway is going to be able to put the ball there. The question is, do you have the guy who can go up and get it? And I think Florida, in many ways, if you look at some of the weaknesses of DJ Lagway, quote unquote weaknesses, Florida stalled in the red zone quite a bit when he was in charge. There was a lot of explosives. The last couple of games, they got a little bit more consistent in the red zone, but Florida struggled a little bit in the red zone. And so you look at that and say, how can we supplement that? And it's a big guy on the outside who can catch back shoulder passes and who can make it easy when you get the one-on-one matchups. Lagway exploits those one-on-one matchups better, just about as well as anybody in the country. And so once you sort of see that as a coach, I can understand why you'd go out and you'd say, hey, how do we get more of that? How do we bring people in who are going to be able to accentuate that? But I think the big thing is that there are going to be guys who want to come play for Lagway or play with Lagway. And so there's going to be folks who come in through the portal. But I think also, if you think about who's already on the Florida roster, Trey Wilson's going to be back from injury this year. And then you've also got guys like Mizell and Marcus Burke and guys who've done something this year, who are also going to have some opportunities to step in there. And so I'm not that worried about the wide receiver position. I know everybody gets excited about the wide receiver position, but I think when you got a quarterback who's as gifted as Lagway, the thing I'm concerned about is on the defense. So when you start talking about Banks staying and who else Florida's going to bring on the defense, those are really the places that I'm focused. The wide receivers, kind of the bells and whistles and the cherry on top in many ways for this team, because I think Florida's going to have a top 10 offense because of the players they'll be able to bring in at wide receiver, but also, like you said, because of some of the guys they have on the roster. But certainly, Gene leaving is indicative that they're going to go out and get some guys to replace him on the roster. And honestly, that's kind of what you've seen so far from the guys who've left the program already, because those are guys who weren't getting major playing time. Hopefully they can go someplace else and get major playing time someplace else. And then hopefully as well, Florida will be able to upgrade at each of those positions as they have the opportunity.
Yeah, we'll get into that list before we move on too. But Will, it's easy for me if you're a transfer portal wide receiver. Ricky Pearsall, Chimere Dike, Elijah Badger. This is what transfer wide receivers have done the last couple of years at the University of Florida. One first-round pick in Ricky Pearsall. The other two guys have, really shown that their worth, taking another step in their careers by coming to Florida. And who knows what the numbers would have been like if they had the DJ Lagway production all season long. But, those guys really had to step up. Trey Wilson goes out with injury. Get plenty of more opportunities as well. But that's something else. If I'm a transfer portal wide receiver, I think if I'm Florida, I'm sure they're going to be doing that. But hey, look what we've done the last couple of years at that spot by bringing transfers in and those guys being integral parts and producing right away in this offense.
Yeah, I mean, it does make you wonder about some of the guys, the five-star guys they've missed on, right? Especially this past cycle when you had Dallas Wilson and Jamie French. And look, I get it. Texas is a good program and Oregon's a good program. But, you think about what Florida's been able to do under Billy Gonzalez in all of his tenures there at Florida. It's not just the guys recently. There's been a lot of development at that position with this particular coach over an extended period of time. And you would think that would be attractive to really anybody who has the opportunity to come into Gainesville.
Well, to your point, Will, Van Jefferson, another transfer.
Trevon Grimes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not as though the wide receivers haven't been successful when they've transferred into Florida. And there has been one sort of, overarching constant when it comes to those guys. And I think, look, I mean, DK and Badger, I think I even tweeted during either the Ole Miss game or the Florida State game that DJ Lagway had made Elijah Badger an awful lot of money, but Elijah Badger made Elijah Badger a lot of money, right? He was open deep a lot and very consistent. I can't remember him dropping a ball. Just getting guys and DK didn't drop anything. And so you get those two guys out there who are really, really consistent. You get guys who can make some acrobatic catches. I think, hands is something that I would really be looking for because Lagway is going to put it around them, and so then it's a question of can they go get it on some of those deep throws that he's going to make. Because as much fun as it is to watch him just drop the ball in like it's a handoff time after time after time, at some point the guy's going to miss by like a foot or two, and you're going to need the guy to go get it. And so I think having bringing in guys who have the hands to be able to handle that will be a big part of it as well. So,
but that down throw, I rewatched it last night. The downfield throw to DK, his last big explosive play. That DK had to stretch out to get that to get that ball. So yeah, going to your point, yeah, guys who can make plays down the field as well when it's just not thrown in the breadbasket.
Yeah, I mean, look, the other thing is wide receivers project pretty easily. Like once you've seen a guy play at the college level on the field, you kind of know what he's got.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of ignored that when Justin Shorter came in from Penn State. And it's not that he was a bad player, but it was clear that he wasn't going to like reach the potential of his 5-star rating once you sort of saw him play for a little bit. And I do think wide receiver, because it's so speed based, because it's so if you run good routes and you're not lazy and you've got and you've got afterburners, it's pretty easy to say, okay, that guy's going to be good. I think the challenging positions to think about are like defensive tackle, offensive line, maybe even linebacker in some capacity. Like, there it becomes a little bit more technique over skill. And so maybe it's a little bit more difficult to project what's going to happen in the portal. So that's the other aspect of this, right? Is you see a guy like Badger who had caught 60 balls a year for the past 2 years at Arizona State. That kind of production can't be faked. And so you bring him into Florida, and whether it was Mertz or whether it was Lagway, if DK or if Badger was open, he was going to get the ball. And it just so happened that he got the ball a little bit more when DJ Lagway was the quarterback. That's because a lot of times his responsibility was to run deep. And we all know DJ Lagway is going to take that shot. So, that's the thing that would excite me. I mean, God, I'm up here in Philadelphia, and the Eagles won yesterday, and they're already yapping at each other because Jalen Hurts isn't taking deep shots to AJ Brown. Like, you're not going to have to yap at DJ Lagway if you're the guy running the deep route. Like, you're not going to if you're open. In fact, I suspect even if you may not be open, he might let it go, and you're going to be rewarded for running down the field. It's not just going to be wind sprints all night while you wait for a check down 3 yards from the line of scrimmage. So. He's going to make somebody an awful lot of money at the wide receiver position. We'll see, both because they're coming in under the NIL auspices in college, but also because I think he's going to be able to allow people to showcase their wares. And if I'm Florida, that's what I'm selling. I'm selling, you're going to be able to come in here and you're going to be able to show the NFL what you got. And, when you average almost 25 yards a catch or whatever it was that Badger averaged, people are going to take a second look, right? And maybe he goes and runs a 40 and it's going to be kind of slow. And, maybe he won't do great in like shuffle drills and things like that. But at the end of the day, someone's still going to look at that and go, yeah, but he's been really productive. And that productivity is something that I think you'll be able to sell because, look, Florida's going to air it out, right? I think next year – Napier's going to always want to run the ball, but I think you sort of saw it those last 3 games where there's a willingness to throw it on second and long. They did deviate from some of the tendencies that we've seen in the past where you get an incompletion on first down and then you run the ball on second to try to get to like 3rd and 7, 3rd and 6 and something manageable. With Lagway, there's not a whole lot of benefit to doing that because he can get you the 10 if you need to. And so there were multiple drives where they just threw, and maybe it was a 3 and out this year, but I think next year it's not necessarily going to be, and the receivers are really going to get highlighted. Yeah,
a lot of those choices there. I have a chance to go look at it, but I do know those guys were known for catching the ball down the field as well. So you could clearly tell what they're targeting there at the wide receiver group.